Maggie McPhee, CEO of Youth Connections, welcome to Business Insider.
Thank you.
And Fortunity's Boardroom.
Yep.
We thank them for that.
Yep.
Lots of things have happened in the last 15 or 16 years
Yep.
since Youth Connections has been working on the case. In a nutshell, what does Youth Connections do?
Well, Youth Connections, it's youthconnections.com.au, and we have 3 subsidiary companies. But the parent company, we work with young people who are in transition from school to the world of work. So we look at employment, education, training and recreation opportunities to help those guys realise their full potential.
And how do you have people on your books? Do you have young people on your books? Do you have a measure at that level of how many you're impacting?
We probably touch the lives of about 8,000 young people, and our patch goes from the lower levels of Lake Macquarie right through to the Harbour Bridge. So the train line all the way down to the Harbour Bridge is our patch, and about 8,000 young people. We would touch their lives in some way.
Annually, or
annually?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of
that's a lot of young people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, if we get specific, that growth has taken 15, 16 years.
Yep.
Over the last 3, well, you've been CEO for 6?
For about 6-7 years.
Okay.
Yep.
If we just take the last 3 years of that, there's been some significant developments. What stick out in your mind, I guess, as things that...
Well, what happened in 2009 at the heart of the global financial crisis, youth unemployment on the Central Coast reached 43%. So almost half of our young people couldn't find a job. That was a pretty shocking statistic, and nobody was shouting it from the rooftops because we were all so ashamed. And I must say, it happened on our watch at Youth Connections. We were ashamed, but we were redeemed because the federal government awarded us a Jobs Fund grant to the tune of about $1.7 million. We knew that when we got that money, we had to do something that would create employment for young people, specifically young people, and also give them a pathway. So it wasn't just about the job or just about some training, that actually be able to move on, transition on to further employment or more training. We had identified a site at Mount Penang Parklands, and that was the old RTA depot when they built the F3 interchange. That had also been a juvenile justice vocational training centre, and it was in rapid decline. In fact, it had been used and abused over many years. Some of the buildings were burnt out, there was damage, every window was broken, it was just massively destroyed and graffitied, and was home to probably a number of young people who were homeless or moving between homes. Anyway, we knew that that would be just an absolutely great site to refurbish and retrofit. So this money was to go towards a sustainable house, which would be a demonstration house to community about sustainability and what you could do in your own house to make it sustainable, and an education centre where we could bring people in and educate them about green efficiencies. And then we would retrofit and refurbish all the other buildings and use them as business incubator spaces for emerging green businesses, with the intention that they would employ young people. A few months into the project, I got a little bit greedy, and I decided that I didn't really want to share that space with anybody because we were becoming very attached to it. We brought in the traditional owners, and they worked around the gardens and started to establish them as bush tucker gardens and bush medicine gardens, and we had some beautiful engravings put in, and we had a gunya built where we were able to do smoking ceremonies and yarning circles and performance areas. So with that sort of information on how the land was being shaped by our traditional owners, I just didn't think that I could hand that across to anybody else, and I couldn't trust that if I did put businesses in those spaces that they would actually employ young people. I would have no control over that. So I thought that a better option would be around education for young people, and so we established some of the spaces for alternate classes, and last year we had the Alesco School, they ran their Year 10 from up there, and Erina High School ran their Trade Start, which was a Year 11. And the children on site there, about 64 of those young people, every one of them had been excluded from mainstream education. So you know, it was a good thing that I think that we did that, but that was my view. And then the large...
So who actually runs those classes and those courses? Do you guys do that, or is it Education Department? Or?
Yeah, last year it was the Alesco Learning Centre, which is Tuggerah Lakes Community College. They ran the Year 10 and Erina High School ran the Year 11. This year we're running our own Year 10, but Erina High is still running the Year 11. The larger sheds that were on that block were absolutely perfect to be transformed into a media centre. So we've developed now a beautiful media centre there, which is, we can do film, television and radio.
We may have to come up and borrow your studio to do some of these interviews.
Absolutely sensational, yeah.
So are they fully equipped now, or?
Well, we're getting there.
We're
getting there.
They have some equipment. We can bring our own.
Yeah, we have the cameras and all that sort of stuff, but we've got a little bit more room to do in the studio. Halfway through that year, that was 2010, we were awarded additional money for an Indigenous Skills Centre. So that meant we could put a horticulture facility. We were able to develop the gardens, like a food garden, classrooms, toilet blocks, a fully commercial kitchen and a cafe, Bush Tucker Cafe. So over that year we created 68 apprenticeships and traineeships for young people, and we probably had well over 100 young people undergo training in construction, conservation and land management, horticulture, a whole range of disciplines, vocational disciplines. We were able to run some specific Indigenous courses for our local Aboriginal people. And of course everything was brought locally, so it created a lot of jobs for tradesmen and all the service industries around that site. It was such a hive of activity for 12 months. And then we kicked off with our first school, alternate school, in February 2011. And we've grown since then. I mean, every day is a new day, evolving. There's still a little bit of a construction site there. But that's probably been the jewel in the crown for Youth Connections, has been Green Central. We called it Green Central, was to be a business incubation, social enterprise and education centre. And it's become all of that, because from the construction of it, we actually did establish some social enterprises. So now we have young people working in construction. So we have a construction team, we've got an engineering workshop, we have an automotive bay, we do car cleaning, we have contracts to do lawn mowing and whippersnipping in some large properties. We have the media centre, we do IT recycling, and of course we've got the Bush Tucker Cafe and hospitality. So there's a lot that we do, and we do sustainability.
It is kind of, it's, I was going to say hidden.
Yeah.
You need to know in Kangaroo Road or
that's right.
Where to look.
But if you had a kid there, and sometimes we have 100 young people there a day, then you would know, because your kid's there, and they would come home very excited about what they'd done, what they'd made that day, or who they'd worked with, or what they'd created.
It's very Central Coast centric.
Yeah.
Do you draw from North Shore to get kids up here as well, or do you have similar sorts of?
Yes, we have. We have brought some classes to have work experience and work placement experiences on site, but they're less inclined to want to come to Gosford. But we have young people. I mean, we all talk about the transport problem on the Central Coast, but I can tell you, we have young people that come from Lake Marmora every day. They don't seem to have a problem.
If you want to get somewhere, you get somewhere.
Young people are masters at it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So what does the next couple of years look like? You've obviously had a construction phase, and I guess a visionary phase where you said, no, I can't, what this is about young people. We don't need existing businesses or small businesses outside that frame coming in. Yeah. So what's the next couple of years look like, Maggie? Yeah.
Well, I would like to think that we would have a consolidation time. I don't think that can ever happen for Youth Connections, because the company has such energy and there's such a lot of talent in the organisation, talent in the organisation. So I don't think we'll ever put our feet on the table and rest. Plus, things are not so good on the Central Coast for young people.
But well, you talk about 43%, 44% unemployment. It's frightening that we may be headed back there.
Yes.
Yes. And again, we don't talk about it enough.
No. No.
And it's not your watch, it's our watch, I think. You don't need to take responsibility for that.
It's everyone's watch. We as a community need to watch that. And of course, our most disadvantaged are our Aboriginal youth and our young people with disabilities. In last year, in February, my Aboriginal staff 24 students from Central Coast high schools. Most of them were Aboriginal students, some were not, some were non-Aboriginal, and we reenacted Charles Perkins' 1965 Freedom Ride. I don't know if you remember the Freedom Rides. I think I was little, but I do remember them happening and my family talking about them. Well, we reenacted that and we went to 21 communities just to see what had changed, because in 1965 it was about Aboriginals getting the vote, and that happened, that referendum went through in 1967. This was about, well, in the December, Julia Gillard had announced that there would be an expert panel formed to rewrite the Australian Constitution to have Aboriginal people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people included in our Constitution, because at the moment they're referred to as flora and fauna. So the expert panel convened, and we thought this was a wonderful opportunity to go around those communities, see what had actually changed for Aboriginal people, and record what those communities would want the expert panel to consider. So we took a message stick and we took a beautiful book which was bound in kangaroo hide, and off we went on a bus. We got some wonderful funding.
Was that government or was it local?
Some government. We got a lot from the Heritage Council. Yeah, it was a mixture of both federal, state and some philanthropic funds. And we travelled around. Now what we've done with that is made a documentary which will be officially screened in Reconciliation Week, so your invitation will be in the mail.
Thank you. We would love, we'll talk more about that later. Yeah.
But what we discovered on that trip, apart from the fact that some of those communities felt that they had been forgotten, that since Charles Perkins' ride they had been forgotten, and just, you know, not many 100 kilometres over those Blue Mountains you've got communities which are in desperate need of support and assistance, and unemployment's, there's no hope. There's no hope for those young people, and that was a terrible, shocking thing for those young people on the Central Coast to actually see places like Walgett and Wellington. They didn't go as far out as Wilcannia, but I understand that's even worse. And to experience the racism firsthand in some of those southern Queensland towns. But those young people, they came of age in that journey. They grew up and they learned. Some of those young Aboriginal people actually learnt where they came from. They found family. It was a very moving experience for all of us. And what that did for me is, apart from the fact that we were able to present the findings to the expert panel, and indeed were invited back to when the panel handed over the recommendations to the Prime Minister. So we were there just a few weeks back in Canberra, and that was an amazing experience for these children in itself. But what that told me is that we've got a really big job to do. We're so lucky on the Central Coast. We've got so many bad things on the Central Coast, but we're so lucky compared to other communities. And we've got real models around social enterprise and how to train people and how to engage with community, Aboriginal community, that we should be going back into those communities and helping them make some changes, you know, learning, because we've learnt the lessons, so giving them some of our experiences.
And you've made those decisions based on Green Central, or Green Central has come out of those decisions.
That's exactly right, that's the model.
So where do you get your inspiration from? Because you are leading here. Well,
sometimes I think the leadership that I show is a bit technical, like I see a problem and find the answer. I'm not sure that I'm always in the practice of leadership. Probably my staff would say that too. But my inspiration just comes from the fact that some things just have to be done. And you come to a point in your life you can't just sit and wait for somebody else to do them, because it hasn't happened. And we don't have too many esteemed leaders in our society. We don't have a particularly cohesive community. And so sometimes you have to rise to the top and just do what needs to be done. So that is the next challenge for Youth Connections. We must take that freedom ride further. Well, they're not freedom riders anymore, they're actually freedom fighters, because it is about equity and inclusion, and some people just don't have it. Not just Aboriginal people, but some people just don't have it. And that's our journey now.
Yeah, and at 40%, 43%, whatever that unemployment, we are building, we have the potential to reduce that group of disenfranchised or unowned youth.
Yep.
So the opportunity on the Central Coast to be that model builder for Walgett or for Dubbo or for Nyngan or wherever, or for Wollongong.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you see, is Youth Connections going to go that far? Have you got the support to drive it that far?
We have a lot of goodwill in some of those communities. We've had people come to us that do similar work, not similar work to us, but have contracts similar to our contracts, that would like to emulate it. But it is, you know, like we were given $1.7 million. That was a good start. If we'd not been given that, we couldn't have developed that site. So it really is, it's such a small investment. Isn't that a small investment?
It's not a lot of money to see the group you're dealing with.
Yep. Yeah. And when you think that in the last 2 years, since that 43%, that unemployment rate's down to 22. Now it still is the third highest in, one of the third, I think it is the third highest in Australia. It's still very, very high, but what a drop. And we have the highest record of traineeships and apprenticeships in anywhere in New South Wales. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, your relationship with corporate Central Coast, you know, the manufacturers, the retailers, the service providers, to get your students, your young people into jobs. How do you build those relationships?
Well, that's where we first started.
Right.
And that was around the coordination of structured workplace learning opportunities for students in Year 11 and 12 that were studying vocational subjects for their HSC. We still do that, and we do about 3.5 placements every year just on the Central Coast.
3,500, I think.
We've got about 2,500 employers on our database. So it's probably, we would know more about employers and about industry probably than anybody else on the Central Coast. We're ringing them daily. We're having students placed there for, you know, blocks of a week, doing their vocational learning. You know, we know when business is dipping. We know which employers are employing. So we've got a pretty good relationship. We don't shout it from the treetops, and we certainly don't sell the database, because it would be...
Did I have that written on my forehead?
Yeah, so it's we have a pretty good relationship. It could always be better. We're more interested in about an opportunity.
Do you talk to them enough? Or when you talk about having better relationships, what does that mean for you? Like building better relationships, what do you need to do?
Well, this is probably the question that's asked by my group training company every single day. But the relationships are not around employer breakfasts or networks or any of that. That employers are not particularly interested in that. Hey, I was an employer. Employers always want to know, what's in it for me? Is it going to save me time, and can I get money from it? So when you're building relationships, you've got to have the whole package. And sometimes those relationships are just about getting in your car and going around an estate and pulling in and having
it's a loaded question, Maggie, because I've been an employer here on the coast, and I didn't understand the training opportunities and skill development opportunities. Yes, because it can inject cash into your front. It can be minimal impact on you as a business. It can actually be, you can build your productivity. And until you get prospects and employers understanding that, you're pushing uphill. So it is about educating, I think. Yeah. And putting messages on televisions isn't the answer either. It is about personal relationships and, you know, knowing people and, you know, sometimes second guessing the game. You know, knowing that absolutely construction's going to be in a bad way once the BER finishes, and of course it has finished. So what's the next thing on the horizon? Knowing that, you know, policy's going to change around, you know, the funded training places with state training services. So what do we have to do next to make sure that we don't miss out, or kids don't miss out? And retail's tough. Are there ways we can support retailers with subsidies to employ youth? Or
maybe we work with retailers and work with young people to think about retail in a different way and to go down the online way. That's what people are wanting. That's why retail's not good. People are still buying, they're just not buying in a traditional way.
They're not out in the shopping centres.
No. So how do we actually tap into that?
So do you have programs to do that, or are you asking me for that answer?
No,
I don't have an answer now for you.
We do, we do all that sort of thing. We're always trying to second guess.
So who should talk to you? Who should talk to Youth Connections if they want to get involved with a program or with skills upgrading, or who do they talk to?
They can talk to any of me or any of my staff
Right.
My staff, any of my
At
staff.
Green Central?
No, not necessarily Green Central. Our main office, of course, is at Tuggerah.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
any of my staff, just a call through the main switchboard will find you the right person.
And you have lots of people.
I have lots of people.
To answer those calls.
I've got about 150 staff.
It is a great website. I recommend anyone to go and have a look at the website. It is I shouldn't say kid. It is youth focused.
It is, yeah.
And we forget how smart those people are.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, and it's kids designed it. I mean, we're in the process of reskinning the main one, but the media one and the Industry Link one are done, and the Green Central one's almost to be launched, and they'll all look pretty much the same. But
we might
it's
have to
exciting.
come up and bring some of our interviewees up to your media studio.
You'd be very welcome. You'd be very welcome.
I won't do that. We'll do this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.